Welcome back to Scuba Diver Live, and another show that aims to inspire, educate, and bring a little bit of fun into your life on this Tuesday evening. Remember, if you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and then you won't miss out on any future installments because we've got some good stuff coming up over the next few weeks. Just remember, if you're watching us live and you've got any burning questions, you can put them to our guest and we'll ask him at the end of the show. Just a little call out before we start. Big shout out to our friends at Night at 90 who are sponsoring this show. They are your one-stop shop for technical diving kit, so check out their website. There's some cool stuff on there. Right, on with today's show, and we have got Dan Jarvis on, who is a leading light within British Divers Marine Life Rescue. So welcome, Dan.
Hello, nice to
meet you. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, and yourself?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Where are you joining us from? And has it been decent weather, or have you had some rain?
Last week was lovely, and I was on holiday last week, so it was great. But Cornwall is not so sunny today. It's really overcast and a bit breezy.
Still a nice part of the world to be in, though.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So as we said, you are involved with BDMLR. I believe you're like the field support officer as well as area coordinator for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Now, I can imagine that is quite a hot spot for the kind of thing that BDMLR get involved with. The name of the organisation gives it away, British Divers Marine Life Rescue. But were you an active diver before you became involved? And how did you actually get into diving in the first place?
The diving actually came afterwards, actually. So I first got involved with BDMLR back in 2002 when I did the Marine Mammal Medic course. And it was actually the following year when I did my PADI open water diver course as well. So it's been a while, actually. But that's how I first got into the diving. I did a tri-dive first and then did the PADI open water course off Falmouth, off Castle Beach, went around some of the U-boat wrecks that are still down there. Saw jellyfish and cuttlefish, which are amazing. Absolutely love cuttlefish. Yeah, it was really great. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, so that's all right. So you actually, that's interesting. I thought you might have been a diver first, and then that was what got you into BDMLR, but you were actually the other way around. So how did you actually get involved to do the Marine Mammal Medic course when you weren't actually a diver then?
I didn't even live near the coast when I first started out. I'm originally from Birmingham, and
yeah, that's about as far away from the water as you can get.
I hide the accent well, Steve. But no, when I was young, we came down as a family to Devon and Cornwall for our summer holidays every year, and fell in love with the place. And we used to visit places like the Cornish Seal Sanctuary and see the rescued seals that were undergoing rehabilitation, and we saw our first wild seal on a trip across to St Michael's Mount. Saw bottlenose dolphins for the first time ever off St Ives, putting on one hell of a show off the harbour one summer as well, which was absolutely amazing, because until you see these things, I mean, particularly for someone like myself who lived in the middle of the country, we didn't know we had that kind of wildlife around our coastline anyway. And when we moved to Cornwall, it just sort of drew us in, really, and we trained as Marine Mammal Medics for BDMLR. We got involved as strandings volunteers for the Cornwall Wildlife Trust's Marine Strandings Network as well, which records the dead animals that wash up around our coast, and where possible try to retrieve them for post-mortem examination as well for the Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme. So that's kind of where it all started, really. It was going from not having the opportunity at all to get involved with wildlife to having it literally on the doorstep.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit there. I think a lot of people don't realise just what we have around the UK coastline. I know I've got friends and family who aren't divers, and whenever there's been a news report or anything about a whale stranding, and it's a fin whale or it's an orca or something, they're just like, didn't know you got them around UK waters. Now, I know some of them aren't regular visitors, but it does just show that sometimes there's anything that can potentially turn up. So, yeah, I totally get what you mean with that. Now, BDMLR was formed way back in 1988. That's a long time ago, that. So, what was your route to the position you're in now? So, I know you said you started off as a Marine Mammal Medic, but obviously you've moved up within the organisation.
Yeah. So, When again, going back to when we first moved down here, it was at the time I just finished my GCSEs and was looking to start A levels. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do as a career back then. I kind of liked science subjects and natural sciences, so I did environmental science and geography and geology. And kind of went on from there, really. Got more involved with volunteering with BDMLR and the Strandings Network at Cornwall Wildlife Trust. Started volunteering also at the Cornish Seal Sanctuary every weekend while I was studying at the local college, and then went on to get a full degree in marine biology at Plymouth University. And then I started working. I worked for 10 years on the animal care team at the Cornish Seal Sanctuary then, but was also heavily involved with BDMLR locally as a volunteer, helping with rescues and fundraising events and training courses and all that sort of stuff. And then about 4 years ago, I actually moved on from the Seal Sanctuary and joined BDMLR in my role now, which is the Welfare Development and Field Support Officer. But I've volunteered with lots of other organisations to get lots of other experience as well. So I've done surveys with organisation Cetacea or Orca, who do marine life surveys on ferries and things like that. So I'm quite lucky. One of the routes is literally just down the road from Penzance to the Isles of Scilly. And they're a one-day one, so they're really easy for me to just hop on whenever I get time to. So I've been doing that for about 14 years now, on that route particularly. And done Sea-Watch surveys for the Sea-Watch Foundation. I'm also heavily involved with the Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust as well. In fact, I'm also a trustee of that charity and their secretary as well, all voluntary again.
How do you have any time to actually do anything there? It sounds like you need about 18 arms. I think you should be an octopus or something, because you've got that many different fingers in different pies, I think. So,
yeah, good question.
So your role with BDMLR then, what does it actually involve, like on a day-to-day basis? What falls under your remit?
So at the moment in particular, I'm sort of redeveloping or helping to redevelop our Marine Mammal Medic training course. Because of COVID, we've had to rejig things, and we're just in the midst of getting that sorted out so we can relaunch now that we're coming out of lockdown and we've got a better idea of how things are going to be now. Yeah. So that's been part of it. I relaunched our lectures for the Marine Mammal Medic course last year, totally rewrote those, and parts of our handbook that all of our medics get when they qualify on the course as well. So I've had a lot to do with that sort of side. I've had a lot of engagement with other organisations, researchers and other rescue groups, not just in this country, but in other parts of the world. So I go to a lot of conferences and have a lot of meetings to share knowledge and skills. And we do sort of a bit of background campaigning works, usually in conjunction with other organisations as well, to raise awareness of particular issues. So particularly things like entanglement and public disturbance towards wildlife, marine wildlife as well. So there's a lot of initiatives and things like that going on in different areas and sort of on larger scales as well. So we're hoping to get some more national stuff going on as well. So that sort of all happens a lot in the background, as I say, and I still do get to go out on call outs as well, particularly in Cornwall. It's a pretty busy area, so I'm still pretty much involved there whenever I can as well. And other than that, just helping with the general operations of the charity as well. So behind the scenes admin and fundraising initiatives, grant applications, all of that sort of stuff. So it's still very much very varied, but my focus is on sort of more on the training side and outreach.
Yeah, no, I can, because obviously BDMLR, from people going to dive shows like the Go Diving show in February, people are used to seeing the BDMLR group. Obviously, you've got a very recognisable logo, but the other thing that usually gives you guys away is giant inflatable seals and dolphins and things that people can see. Now, I suppose with divers, a lot of divers are aware of BDMLR. It's probably more of a challenge, I would imagine, when you're trying to promote to more the general public about what you guys do. What are some of the other events and stuff that you've been involved with like for BDMLR?
So we go to things like, as you say, Go Dive and the Birmingham Dive Show as well. We have public talks that we do as well for special interest groups. We've been out to like the WI or specialist marine wildlife interest groups as well, photography groups, and we'll go out and do talks. We do quite a lot with schools and colleges as well. We quite often get invited in to give talks or even physical workshops, again using those inflatable models that you mentioned as well. So last year, myself and my colleague at head office, Julia Cable, we went to the University of Surrey, the vet school there, and did a whale rescue workshop with the students there, and they really got stuck into that. It was great fun. So there's all of that side of things going on as well. So we like to get out and publicise not only ourselves but also the main marine wildlife issues that we come across in our line of work as well. So doing some good public outreach like that gets people to know who we are, but also some of the things that they can do to help.
Yeah, well, exactly, because obviously we've had a lot of stuff with some of the animals that have been washed up where they found, they've got X amount of kilograms of plastic inside them, or like you say, the entanglement issues and stuff like that. But probably the plastic is the biggest thing to the general public that's got impact, because it is something that they can see and think, well, I can try and help reduce that, or, litter picks, beach cleanups and stuff like that. So, I can totally get that. Now, BDMLR, as we said, British Divers Marine Life Rescue, but it originally started out mainly with seals. It was kind of a seal rescue group organised with seals. But over the years, it's kind of progressed to live up to its name, really, and it works with all manner of marine mammals, including dolphins and whales. What are some of the major challenges with dealing with whales over seals? Because, I mean, an adult seal's a big animal, but when you move on to an adult dolphin or onto even a juvenile whale, that's a completely different story.
Oh yeah, size definitely matters with these guys. So seal pups are the majority of what we deal with, usually in the first few days or weeks, possibly months of their lives. Over 90% of the call outs that we get on our hotline are about that particular animal, and we do occasionally get calls to adult animals. Sometimes they're totally fine, they're just sleeping in the water or something, or if they're undergoing their molt, which they do once a year, they'll spend a lot of time out of the water, just sort of conserving energy, and they spend less time feeding, so they do lose weight and can look a bit scruffy while their old fur comes out and the new stuff comes through. So we've had a few of those cases earlier on this year, especially during lockdown as well. When we get to the dolphins, though, they're and the whales, they're quite different to deal with compared to seals. There's more limitations on what we can and can't do with them, whereas with seal pups, obviously, we can pick them up and take them to a vet or to one of the rehabilitation centres, and they can go for care, whereas we don't have that option in the UK for live stranded cetaceans. There are no facilities that are designed or appropriate for them to be kept in for that purpose, and also the legislation around it is very tight as well. One of our veterinary consultants, James Barnett, many years ago, he actually went to some of the big aquariums in the USA who do cetacean rehabilitation there, and even with those incredibly well-funded and hugely experienced teams behind them that they have there, some of the success rates for the animals that they were getting were 2% to release them back out to the wild, which is incredibly low. And there's also the sort of the secondary issue of if you take in an animal that's then deemed not to be releasable by the veterinarians, we can't keep it in captivity either. So we would have to put it to sleep. And again, that was something back in the 1980s that was phased out in as a result of public opinion that was so heavily against cetacean captivity too. So that's another reason why it doesn't happen in this country. So it's really difficult to deal with the cetaceans because you do have to deal with them on the beach as they are, and a vet will come out and assess them and will make a decision on whether it's suitable to try to refloat them, or if not, then we do have to put them to sleep again to stop them from suffering, because we can't just put them out knowing they're in poor health and are very unlikely to survive, as actually it's a welfare issue. Then we would then be causing that animal more pain and suffering, which isn't the right thing to do. It really is not the right thing to do. Yeah, so it's all about making the right decisions for these animals and having that training and that experience to make those calls. And they can be really difficult calls sometimes.
I can imagine. And like you said, with a seal pup, at the end of the day, you can kind of dive on one, wrap it up in a towel, and you can pick it up and you can carry it. if it was a juvenile, or even, sort of like teenager, if you like, of a seal, it's a bigger animal, but it's probably still manhandleable. But as soon as you get up to a dolphin or a whale, then, like you said, you can't move them necessarily. But I have seen you've got flotation devices and stuff that you can use if you are able to get them in the water to support them and everything. So did you develop those specially, BDMLR, or did you manage to get, expert advice from elsewhere and kind of modify them to your needs?
Yeah, they were actually created by Project Jonah, which is basically our counterparts over in New Zealand. They get quite large pilot whale mass strandings over there, so they'd already had that sort of experience and had developed this whale rescue pontoon system, inflatable pontoon system. So we've had that shared with us a long time ago now, back at the end of the 90s now. And we use them here, and we have a company in the UK that actually makes them now, and we also pass them on, sell them on to other rescue groups and organisations around the world now, which is fantastic. So they're able to have more options with their animals too. So the inflatable whale rescue pontoons are basically a mat and two inflatable tubes that go either side of it, and you can, if the whale's the right size, you can manoeuvre it to get the mat underneath and attach the pontoons, and when the tide comes in, you can inflate them, and the weight of the animal, it can take up to about 2 tons, so it's good for smaller minke whales and pilot whales, which would be around about that size. So it works really well for them, but anything bigger, we'd either need to get extra pontoon sets to put onto them, but sometimes the animals are just far too big. So like you say, fin whale, which could be 60, 70 foot long, there's no chance that we're going to be able to get a mat underneath that. There's no way of moving it. It is all based on the tide, but even then you're still very limited, because the longer these animals spend out of the water and gradually crushing themselves under their own weight, as of course they've never evolved to have to support their own weight on their skeletal structure. So once they start to cause internal damage to themselves, there probably isn't a high chance that animal's going to survive, even if it does refloat before it passes away, unfortunately. So again, it's timing and really difficult calls sometimes have to be made, like with the fin whale we recently had in the River Dee.
Yeah, well, I was just going to come on to that, actually, because I was just going to say that during COVID-19, when obviously we've all been in lockdown and everything, it seemed like obviously the animals hadn't heard that there was a pandemic going on. Because as we reported on the website, BDMLR have been just as busy as you normally have. And the fin whale in the River Dee, which actually isn't far away from where I live, was one of the prime cases there. And so, yeah, so it just seemed to be still being busy. But that was a tragic case. But that showed exactly what you mean, that the first time it washed up, it seemed reasonably positive when it refloated and it seemed to be swimming off and it was in a reasonable state. But then it re-stranded, and that must be very disheartening for the rescuers when you're doing the very best you can. It must be really difficult to deal with those highs and lows, I imagine.
Yeah, it very much can be a roller coaster. You don't know how the animals are going to respond when you refloat them. They might start to show behaviors that aren't so good. They might just be listless in the water. They might not try to swim or anything like that. Sometimes it does take them a while to regain their composure and their sort of blood circulation gets pumping properly again. So you do have to give it time. Sometimes it's not always immediate success or anything like that. When we release these animals into the water, we've got to give them time. It's really important. With the whale in the Dee, we were quite lucky that it stranded when the tide was just on the turn and coming back in. So it didn't actually spend too long out of the water before too much significant damage would have been caused internally to it. So when it did refloat, we did have some hope that it might find its way out, and it was seen to go out into the open water outside of the estuary. So it was quite heartening, with such a large animal as well, because we don't often get the chance for that particular outcome to happen, that we might have had a good success on our hands with that one. But unfortunately, late on in the night, we'd heard it was back in the estuary again, although we didn't think it had stranded at that point. And then, of course, the next morning found that it had re-stranded. And I think at that point we knew, because of the amount of time it was going to be out of water that day, that there really wasn't going to be much hope for it then. So it became more about giving the animal the care it needed to keep it comfortable without compromising its welfare, of course, keeping everyone safe, because it was a really quite dangerous area right out in the estuary. It's quite flat. The tide moves in and out really, really fast there. There can be, you know, deep mud or quicksand if you don't know where to walk. So that's why we had the RNLI and the Coast Guard out to help us, with some local fishermen who were really great and really experienced with the area, and were a huge help to our team who were there. But again, you're sort of there with the animal, knowing pretty much what the outcome is going to be at that point, and you have to manage the expectations of the people who are looking on and hoping for the best, but you know in your heart of hearts that that's not going to be the case, and you've got to try and deliver that kind of message to them in, you know, a kind of a gentle and respectable kind of way as well, and get them to understand that this is what's going to happen, and these are the reasons why it's going to happen as well.
Yeah, I can imagine it is a very difficult one with that. I mean, it's one thing, you know, rescuing a fish that's stuck in a net or something like that and everything, but when you're dealing with a marine mammal, particularly dolphins and whales, I've never been lucky enough to see whales when I've been diving yet. I've heard them a lot, but I've never actually seen them. But I have dived and had dolphins turn up several times, and you can tell how intelligent they are, just the way they look at you. You know, you're almost at that point where you're like, well, who's watching who for entertainment at that point? So I can imagine that must be very difficult when you've got, I mean, I saw the photographs, obviously, we put them on the website, of the eye of that fin whale. You can tell there's intelligence there and everything, and that must be the worst thing, is when it's laid there and you know that there's thoughts and processes going through its mind, and then you're there trying to help and everything. That must be even worse. Like I said, it's different if it's something that you're not getting anything back from.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with a marine mammal and you know they're quite a sentient creature, that must be very difficult. Like you said, you've got passers-by watching, and they're all G'd up thinking that it's all going well. You might know it's not going to end up well. So there's a lot of different things, actually, that, you know, you guys have got to manage. It's not a very straightforward thing that you do.
No, it's not. It's incredibly complex, and there's really detailed protocols that we go through and decision trees that we go through with our vets when making decisions about these animals and what's right for them in those circumstances. So, like I say, yeah, it can be a real roller coaster, and especially if you're there on the ground, you kind of get quite into it. You've got to have that level of professionalism and just get on with the job. But once it's all over, it really hits you quite hard afterwards. It all just comes back to you, and you know it can really be quite you know, take its toll on you. So it's always good for us to have people who you know, they'll support each other and have people to talk to if they want to. You know, it's all part of the support network that we try and have in the background too for us. And it's always great, like we did with the fin whale. You know, we had such overwhelming support for that. It was absolutely incredible. The public were really, really brilliant, really understanding with the whole situation. And you know, it always helps our team when they come back, and eventually they'll look back through Facebook and see messages of support and everything, and that can really help as well.
Yeah, I can imagine it is. Yeah, it is that like almost post like traumatic incident kind of thing to deal with and everything. But you touched on that there. Actually, it's not just dealing with the animal that could potentially be dangerous, because I mean, some of these creatures, like you said, they're big. You know, now I know that usually if they've been stranded, they're maybe not going to be thrashing around when they get back into the water. But I suppose if they haven't been stranded that long, potentially there is a risk with the animals you're dealing with that they could cause an injury. But as you touched on there, you know, the location some of these happen in can be very dangerous. You know, like you said, you risk the thing of mudflats and tides and this and that, and that's a whole other thing that's got to be taken into account. You can't just go charging into the rescue. You've got to think about the safety of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to do, you know, dynamic risk assessments, get local advice wherever you can, to help guide you with those hazards that are around there. Have the right PPE to mitigate. So we'd need everyone to be in wetsuits or dry suits with life jackets, gloves and masks as well. You know, these guys, you know, they'll be bleeding probably. They might be urinating, they might defecate, that sort of thing. It can get everywhere and it can get quite messy. So we've got to try and protect ourselves. As these guys are mammals, we can fairly easily pass diseases back and forth between us as well. So it's really important for us to to protect ourselves too and keep our team safe.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, as we said, BMR seems to be busy all year round. But are there certain times of year when you seem to get busier than normal?
Yes. So I mentioned earlier about 90% of our call-outs are about young seals, and we have two species of seal in this country. We have the common seal, also known as the harbour seal. That's mainly found on the east coast of England and around parts of Scotland, and a few other dotted around places as well. So we're literally just starting now their pupping season, and that will last until sort of mid-August, late August sort of time. So it's a relatively short amount of time, and the mum only stays with their pup for just under a month or so. So it's a really short amount of time that they stay together. And they're really vulnerable at that time because mum and pup have to stay together so mum can feed it and get the pup to put all that weight on, so that will be able to survive once she leaves, because they don't teach their pup necessarily how to feed on fish or anything like that. So once mum leaves, all her job has been to do is to make her pup as fat as she can off of her milk, and then everything else after that is up to the pup. But if they've been separated early, due to public disturbance, which is a particularly big issue, unfortunately, with people or dogs getting too close and scaring the mother off, that sort of thing. Or sometimes the mum will leave the pup on the beach and go off foraging for herself, and people come along, see the seal pup on its own and pick it up and move it away. And that's not the right thing to do, because the mum recognises her pup by smell. So if someone's been touching and handling the pup, or moving it around on the beach or taking it away, then the mum, if she does come back and finds it again, she might not recognise it as her own and still move on looking for what she thinks might be her own pup elsewhere. So that unfortunately does happen quite a bit. So we're just coming into one of our busy times of the year now over the summer, and the other one is from autumn and throughout the winter, and that's when our other species, the grey seal, have their pupping season. So they're a little bit different. So they have a much longer one, and it is a bit different going around the country. So starting in Wales and southwest England, it's sort of late August, early September when it begins and runs through till around November, December sort of time. And as you get to Scotland and the east coast of England, it's a few weeks behind. So they're sort of 6 to 8 weeks behind with when their pupping season starts. So that's why that grey seal season lasts quite a bit longer. So it can start in September and it'll still be going in March, April, May, even sometimes with the last few that are being picked up. So really the only time of year when we have a little bit of a break in between is sort of May, June, and that's it.
I was just going to say, because of those two being the majority of your call outs, and the fact that one covers this part of the year and one covers a lot more of the year, you are pretty much kept busy, the whole year round. And then throw into the mix any odd, dolphins, porpoises, whales that, I suppose they're any time of the year, really. You never know what's coming around. Yeah,
the cetaceans are pretty random. Some things you can slightly see increases of at certain times of the year. So again, just recently it's been harbour porpoise calving season through sort of May and June. So we tend to get more reports of stranded porpoises at that time. Sometimes it's calves that are separated from their mum, unfortunately, or sometimes it can be just for other reasons as well. I know there's certainly been quite a few porpoise calves live stranded over in the Netherlands recently. They seem to have had a bit of a bad patch with them, unfortunately, in the last couple of months. But for some of the other things like fin whales, they're pretty random where and when they'll happen, it seems.
Yeah, no, I can imagine with that. Now, have you seen the number of incidents rise over the years? And are you seeing any more of a particular type or involving particular species?
We've definitely seen a rise. We've got, if I can share my screen, I've got a chart I can show. Hopefully, I can do technology. There we go. Right, so we're just looking at the last few years of data on this. This is for call-outs nationally across the whole country. And I will caveat that call-outs just refers to all calls that we've had to our hotline. So this will include false alarms where seals have been reported to us and actually turn out to be rocks. It does happen. Or animals that we've checked on and have been absolutely fine and there's no need for any concern about them. And of course, it does cover animals that have been rescued or taken for rehabilitation and things like that as well. So back in 2016, we had 868 call-outs. In 2017, we passed 1,000. 2018, we were close to 1,500. And then 2019, we were on 1,916. So it is going up fairly substantially, between about 20 to 25% year on year in the last few years. And there seems to be a few reasons why this is happening. One of the main ones is public awareness. Social media technology has advanced so quickly in the last few years, and it is really easy now to just pop onto your phone and find who we are, our hotline number, or someone who knows who to call, that sort of thing. That's certainly one of the reasons, and also through our own efforts of promoting ourselves at public events, talks, that sort of thing as well. People are just getting to know us more and more these days, and we're getting more calls as a result. There's a few things that are happening out in the environment as well that are causing an increase in the number of call outs as well. So there's certainly more people going to the coast. There's more activity around the coast. There's more diversity of activities around the coast. So in recent years, coasteering and paddleboarding have become so much more popular and widespread, and they're potentially getting into areas where boats and jet skis and other things haven't previously been able to get into as easily or at all. So they're possibly finding animals that we might not have known about previously, as well as just general public disturbance as well. With more people going to the coast, we're getting more instances, like I mentioned, with seal pups being handled inappropriately and separated from their mums, that sort of thing too. In the last few years, something that particularly I have seen personally as well down here in the southwest of England, since around the 2013-2014 winter, we seem to be getting more and more severe storms coming in off the Atlantic, and more frequently as well. And I think this is down to the effect of climate change. It is one of the predicted effects when you look at the science and the research that's out there, and it is something that I feel we're witnessing actually happening over the last few years, and it is really affecting us down here. In southwest England and southwest Wales as well. The west coast of Ireland's been hit pretty hard. We hear from our colleagues over at Seal Rescue Island when these storms come in. And in the last 2-3 years, we've had some really bad situations where we've had these storms come in right on the peak of our grey seal pupping season, and a couple of times these storms have actually hit on the peak of some of the biggest spring tides of the year. So it is like the perfect storm of the worst conditions you could hope for, because you've got these incredibly vulnerable little pups with really rough seas and really high tides, and they've got nowhere to go. So they're getting swept away from the mums. They've got no chance. They're getting dashed on the rocks and injured. They're losing lots of weight as they're fighting all of the currents and the waves to try and find themselves to safety. So they're losing a lot of weight and getting exhausted as a result. So we're seeing a lot of pups in that condition at certain times that are coming in just after these storms have hit, and we tend to get a lot of calls just after these. So, for example, I know for my local area, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, in December last year, we had just over 120 call-outs in 1 month just for this area, which was just ridiculously busy. That's a lot of people being sent out to go and check on those animals. And the same thing happened back in 2017, 2018. We had a lot of call outs in the October of 2017 to pups, as we had a bad storm on the peak of a spring tide at the peak of pupping season. And then the same thing sort of happened in January and February of 2018, when it was actually more a series of storms. We had about 6 weeks continuously of stormy weather, and one storm after another coming in with all sorts of names like Dylan and Eleanor and all of those ones coming in. And we were getting 10-15 call outs a day down here, and we just ran out of space to put all of the seals in. And so some of them were just exhausted and needed 2 or 3 days to recover, and we could stick them back out wherever it was safe, which was really hard to do because a lot of places weren't really that safe for them. So it was a really, really difficult time, and that seems to be something that's a trend that is continuing now, and that's one of the other reasons why we're getting busier too. So it is really concerning now, because it's pushing us to our limits, as well as the rehabilitation centres that we work with. Space is limited in those as well, of course. So we need to be really thorough with our assessments and make sure that the animals we're taking in definitely do need to come in, so they're not taking up space for something more desperate.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a problem, because I think I've been to the seal rescue place down in Cornwall. Is that in Gwig? Is that right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's a great facility, but like you say, they've got a limited amount of room. And probably on a normal monthly cycle, they've probably got enough space for having seals in, get them, healthy so they can be released. The next one can come in. But then, like you said, with these, like you said, the perfect storm, if you've got it's hitting at the point when the seals are vulnerable and you've got those combination of factors, but that's it. You might have enough, marine mammal medics to handle them and get down. But then if you've got nowhere to put them, you catch 22 then. It's like, what do you do with them? So, yeah, but you're seeing firsthand what climate change is doing. So,
yeah, it's scary, really scary.
It's not good with that. Now, you've obviously been involved with quite a lot. You've been involved with rescues for a long, long time by the sounds of it, both with BDMLR and with some of the other groups that you volunteer with. What are some of the most memorable rescues that you've been involved with? Putting you on the spot now, you see.
There's so many to pick from. I'll have to go with the first call out we ever had as a BDMLR medic. It was actually a live stranded minke whale. It was about 20 foot long or something, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was so long ago. This was in May 2003. It actually live stranded on the Long Rock Reef just off of Marazion Beach, Long Rock Beach at Marazion, near St Michael's Mount. So we actually had to paddle across with our equipment to get to it in the first instance, because it wasn't actually right on the beach. It was just a little bit offshore, and it was too shallow for a boat there as well. So we took all our equipment across and started giving it the first aid, keeping it wet, and timing its breathing rate and all the things that we would normally do. And it had somehow managed to get itself wedged in a almost perfectly shaped rock pool for it to sit in, so it wasn't too uncomfortable, luckily. And we just waited for the tide to come up around it, which fortunately was only about 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours away. So again, we were quite lucky with the timing of the tide on this one. And we had a boat, once the tide had started to come back in, that had come out, and we managed to get the whale into our inflatable pontoon system and attached to the side of the boat. And just as they were starting to go out around the reef, the whale actually panicked and got free of the pontoons and restranded itself back on the far end of the reef. So we had to all clamber over to the far end. It was sort of semi-stranded. It actually managed to sort of push itself off the rocks, but it went straight back inshore, realised it was right on the beach, turned and went and stranded back at the complete opposite end of the reef then, and properly did get stuck again up there. So we all had to climb back to the far end. We were a bit knackered by then, and managed to get it back in the pontoons this time, back on the side of the boat, and the boat took it back out around the reef. And this time it didn't panic, and it stayed really nice and calm for us. And they released it back out, and it didn't come back in, which was fantastic. So for a first call out, that's pretty amazing to have, a fairly sizable whale and to have successfully refloated it. So I guess it was a little bit of a baptism by fire, because it's not your usual sort of seal pup that most volunteers get to go to as their first shout. But there have been so many memorable call outs over the years. We get odd things turn up from time to time, and one of my favorites is turtles. We get leatherback turtles. They're the really big ones, and they can somewhat regulate their temperature to survive in our water temperatures around here. And they can get sort of 6-7 feet long, even bigger than that. The largest recorded was in Wales in 1988, and that was about 10 foot long. Really huge, sizable animals, really heavy. But it's not those that we tend to see stranded. It's actually the hard-shell turtles, which come from the tropics, so like the Gulf of Mexico. And these are loggerhead turtles, Kemp Ridley turtles, and occasionally other species that are quite rare as well. And they can't survive in our waters, but they end up here when they get blown off off course along the Gulf Stream and come to us instead of going across to sort of the Canary Islands or the Azores or the Mediterranean or places like that where they should be. And when they come up on the beaches, they're usually cold shocked, hypothermic, starved, and in a really poor condition. And we do see these turtles wash up from time to time, and they're just they sometimes they don't do very well at all, and they die fairly quickly because they're just in such a bad way. They're already too far gone for anyone to do anything with. But we do try to rehab them with our colleagues at the sea life centres or the Blue Reef aquariums, and they can take them in, and they'll take them back to the Canary Islands and release them, which must be a lovely job for somebody, not me. But I don't know, you kind of think reptiles don't really have much personality or anything, especially when you compare it to a dolphin or a seal or something like that. But you know what? They really do. And I really love turtles because they just are really quite awesome creatures in their own right. And I really enjoy, not having them stranded, but just having that opportunity to try and rescue them as well as sort of a little bit of something different for what we do as well. And we don't get many of them, so they do tend to stick out in your mind a bit more as well.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I know what you mean about turtles, though. I've encountered a lot of turtles over the years of diving, and they are one of my favourite animals because they are very curious. They like seeing a reflection in your dome port of your camera. So I'll often find them come over and look at themselves, and then they try to eat the camera. Or I've had them where they've come over and have like the piping in the side of your wetsuit, so they'll come and start wanting to have a little chomp. And they've got quite big jaws on them, so you don't really want them to have an exploratory bite or anything. But I also think it's ever since Finding Nemo, because every time I see a big turtle now swimming along, in my head, all I can hear is like the voice of Crush from that, because it just seems to fit with the way they are. They're very chilled out creatures. So yeah, I totally get what you mean with turtles.
Yeah.
Now, I can imagine that there's obviously, like you said, there's moments that are exhilarating, like your first call out. And I have to say, like you said, for a first call out, that was pretty epic that you got to go to a whale and not some seal pup or something. So you definitely looked out there. But yeah, so ones like that where, you really worked hard for that one and it was a positive outcome, must be, like I said, exhilarating, a real triumphant moment. And then, like we said, on the flip side, you can work your heart out and like the fin whale, unfortunately, it's a tragic outcome. But there must also be a bit of a middle ground because there must be some really funny things that happen when you've been on some of these rescues. So what are some of the funniest moments you've had when you've been on rescues?
Yeah, there's so many of those as well. So I remember one time we had a seal pup, which it was okay. It wasn't too bad, just a little bit tired and needed somewhere to go and rest. So we picked it up from where it was because it was in the middle of a harbour and it was quite busy and we didn't want it being disturbed or pestered or anything like that. And we took it away and just popped it on a quiet beach nearby where it could just rest to its heart's content. But generally what we find when we do this is actually when we take them to this other beach, they quite quickly make for the water anyway. And they'll just sort of hang around in the shallows and maybe come back out when you've gone, or they'll swim off and find somewhere else that's sheltered and quiet for them instead. But this one particular seal literally took 2 flops out of the cage, looked back up at us and was like, no, I'm going to sleep right here now. And there'd been a few people that had followed us across the beach to see what we were up to. So there's about 10 people stood around and we'd let it out and it just went straight to sleep. And it stayed there all day asleep. So we ended up having to stay there all day just to keep an eye on it, just in case, because it just did seem really exhausted. But it did move on by the next day, and it was all good. So that was kind of funny, just to watch this animal just pop out of the cage, and you sort of expected it to run away, and it was just like, no, can't be bothered. I'm just going to sleep here. It's fine. So that was quite amusing. I should really just get straight into the toilet humour, really, because that's where it's all going to be based, isn't it? Yeah, when you're dealing with seals, you can take their temperature with a thermometer, and it does go up the back end, and quite often they will have a response to that, which might not be that pleasant. Yeah, I've had incidences when I've been taking a temperature and a seal has managed to wee directly inside my glove instead of on it, or not on it at all, which would be ideal. or just do the most massive explosive diarrhea in your direction. And you got to take it in good humour. It's just animals being animals, really, isn't it? And, I'm not sure whether to say it or not. Actually, there was one time, probably one of the funniest things that has happened is, again, taking a temperature on a seal, but this seal, instead of having explosive diarrhea, had explosive flatulence, and I'd never experienced before the force of flatulence actually flapping my glove. It was just hilarious, and me and the other person who was restraining the seal were just in absolute stitches. It was hilarious. I guess you had to be there, but it just was.
I can imagine though that it's things like that probably help you get through the ones when you have the more tragic outcomes, because at least if you can have a laugh about stuff, it kind of keeps your spirits up. So yeah,
it's a real mixed bag.
Yeah, totally get that. Now, finally, other than fundraising, which obviously, as we know, like any charity, I'm sure is much appreciated, people can actually get involved more directly, and that's by becoming a Marine Mammal Medic, as you mentioned. So tell us a bit more about the course, because I know it's gone through a little bit of a rejig and everything. I think you rewrote it last year anyway, but also with COVID-19, you've had to change how it's run. And just a little bit about what it allows people to do once they've completed it.
Yeah, so it's a one-day course, and you get to I say play, you get to train on inflatable model animals. So we have a seal pup and a dolphin and a pilot whale. They're all life-size, and we fill them with water, so they'll be relatively accurate weights to the real thing. And we'll then teach you with our instructors how to restrain the seal safely with a towel to prevent it from biting you and to help keep it calm and secure while you do the health assessment on it. We'll teach you how to lift and carry a dolphin and refloat it using a tarpaulin, and then of course with the whale using those inflatable rescue pontoons and how that system works as well. And this is open to anybody. The minimum age is 18. You don't have to be a diver or even be able to swim, actually. The very large majority of our work actually takes place on land. Again, as I say, it's usually seals that have hauled out that we're getting called out to. But of course, if we have a stranded dolphin, there's usually on the beach and away from the tide for some period of time as well. So there's always plenty to do around these, whether it's directly taking care of the animal or talking to the public and explaining the situation, organising equipment, or communicating with head office and the vets. There's lots and lots of little jobs that are involved with it, and you learn all of that on the course as well. And in the real thing, of course, there's lots and lots of things that everyone can get involved with helping out doing. So if you pop onto our website, bdmlr.org.uk, there's a page on there which shows you where our upcoming training courses are going to be held and when, and it'll explain more on there as well what's involved on the actual course as well, and you can book online for the course as well. At the end of the course, you do get a qualification, a certificate as a Marine Mammal Medic, and you get a handbook that explains everything that you've learned on the course, including species ID and health assessment points. There's a whole veterinary section in there as well for the vets that join up with us too. And a lot more background information as well on the species themselves, so their adaptations to the marine environment, for example, too. So you get that and a few other little bits and bobs like car stickers. You get a ID card as well, which you should show when you go to an incident, particularly if it's a big one like a stranded cetacean, as sometimes they might involve the Coast Guard or the RNLI, and they might want to check who you are before you go along and start doing things to the animal. So yeah, it's open for absolutely everybody. As I say, minimum age is 18, and you'll get stuck in as much or as little as you want. As after that, you're all volunteers. You go onto our call out database system, and whenever we get an incident in a particular area, we'll send usually a mass text out to that particular region, and it's just whoever's available at the time, because you never know when a call out's going to happen. Usually, yeah, they're going to be in the daytime, but some are going to be on weekdays when people are at work, some are going to be on weekends when more people are free. Sometimes you get them late at night, and of course all around the coastline as well. So sometimes they might be further away, or sometimes they might be on your doorstep as well. So the more volunteers that we have, the better we're able to respond, and to respond quicker as well to these animals.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's just great to have a charity where people can actively get it's great raising money for charities, but it's a great way they can actively get involved on a real hands-on basis. And like you said, the more people that are marine mammal medics, it gives you thicker coverage around the country, and it should mean you've always got people available to come and assist.
Yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier, basically. Most of our funding also comes from the Marine Mammal Medic course as well. So obviously, as a result of COVID, we have taken a hit there. But there's all sorts of other fundraising events that our volunteers have been really great at doing as well. So we've got online auctions, and we've got volunteers who are doing sponsored things like having their head shaved, or sponsored runs or swims, or other things that they've been able to do during lockdown where they've been able to as well, just to help keep us going, which has been really fantastic, and we really appreciate their efforts too.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and that's all we've got time for this evening. Just like to say a massive thank you to Dan. Thanks for being with us, Dan. That was really interesting, and joining us on the virtual sofa. And a final shout out for Nights at 90. Like we said, one-stop shop for your technical diving. So check out their website. They've got lots of good stuff on there. Our next live stream will be on Tuesday, the 7th of July. We're going to be joined by Richard Stevens and Hayley Elizabeth, who have carved out a bit of a niche for themselves as a traveling duo shooting stills and video. So they'll be talking us through some of the adventures that they've been on. So look forward to seeing you then. Stay safe.